Hi, everybody. Hi. I think we have enough people joining us now, so I'm going to begin. Hi, I'm Praveen, and on behalf of Penguin Books, I'm so delighted to have you all join us for a very exciting launch this Sunday afternoon. For those of you who joined us from India, I think it's morning in the States. For this most pertinent book, it's called Good Genes Got Bad, a short history of vaccines and biologics, failures, successes, and controversies, authored by Dr. Narendra Chirmule. So vaccines and vaccine development is all we've heard these last 2 years, thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic, which I think has become very much a part of our lives now. But what goes into making of these vaccines? Why do they take so long to manufacture? What are the different phases of clinical trials? Dr. Chirmule's book answers very lucidly many of these questions and so much more. Dr. Chirmule, as many of you know, is the founder director of Symphony Tech Biologics, which is a company focused on statistical, technical, and quality aspects in drug development. Most recently, he was the head of research and development at Biocon Research Labs, Bangalore, which is one of India's largest biotech companies. Under his leadership, the company received the first ever approvals of biologics by the FDA and EMA in India. In the book, there are 7 main stories that talk about failures in drug development and the lessons from which have led to successful innovative therapies. Dr. Chirmule has written about these chapters from personal experiences, as having been part of many of these clinical trials and from the many students who have taken his courses on basic immunology and regulatory aspects of drug development. The stories weave through his experiences while working at the Advanced Center for Treatment, Research and Education in Cancer at PenU, Merck, Amgen, Biocon, and of course, Symphony Tech. In conversation with Dr. Chirmule today is Roopa Pai, a dear friend and undoubtedly one of India's best-known children's authors, which includes the award-winning Gita for Children and its prequel, The Vedas and Upanishads for Children. She has written over 25 books so far, of course, which is no big feat for her. And these include picture books, fiction and non-fiction on themes as varied as sci-fi fantasy, popular science, math, Indian philosophy, life skills, and most recently, medicine. Her recent book for children, Leeches to Slug Glue, explore 25 explosive ideas that made and are making modern medicine, which is why I think she's the perfect person on the panel today, even though I think she thinks otherwise. So hi Naren, hi Roopa, it's so lovely to have you both, and we're very much looking forward to today's session on this most important book. Over to you both.
Thank you. Thank you, Gurveen. Lovely introduction. I'm delighted to be here. Yeah, and I have actually very little credibility to be interviewing Naren on this book, except that I have written a book for children on medicine. It's called 25 Explosive Ideas That Made and Are Making Modern Medicine. So in the course of that, I got to read up a little bit about vaccines and things like that, and got very interested. I've always been interested in medicine, but writing this book crystallized some of those concepts a little better in my mind. And Naren is a friend, so I was very happy to be part of this, to be interviewing him, because he might tell you himself, but I was instrumental actually in a way in pushing him towards writing this book. And the other thing I want to say is this is a fantastic book, right? I've just finished reading it. It's not such an easy read for somebody like me. I'm sure somebody who's more into the field, who knows a little bit more, will find it a very, very simplified, very lucid read. But even for me as a rank layperson, it explained quite a lot of things in a very lucid manner, I think. So while the first 2 chapters were a bit of a struggle and I had to keep many tabs open on the internet to understand, wait, what is capsid and what is envelope and how do viruses actually work? I had to go back to high school biology and figure it out. But as it went on, it builds very beautifully on what has been explained in previous chapters. And it becomes clearer and clearer. And that's why I enjoyed the very last edition, which wasn't supposed to be there in the book at all, but because of the times we find ourselves in, looking for a vaccine, for the desperate search for a vaccine for COVID-19. And suddenly you understood a lot of things in how the vaccine came to be developed at this crazy rate, at this crazy pace. And you realize that basically, as he says in the book somewhere else, these immunologists who came up with this were standing on the shoulders of giants. And I think Naren has been part of those giants as well, who have worked their whole lives, decades and decades of work in immunology. And that's why I'm very happy to be in conversation with him today. The other thing I wanted to say was, Naren, you may not have realized, but today is 10/10/2021, and the digits add up to 7.
Ah, love it.
And Naren explains in the intro to the book that 7 is his lucky number, and that's why there are 7 chapters in the book, and that's why there are 7 vaccines, the developments that he talks about, and everything. And I was like, my God, this is a sign. We are talking on 10/10/2021, and I think he also believes in science. I also believe in science, and I mean, he's also researched or is interested in philosophy, ancient Indian philosophy. So am I, and I like those references he's brought in. So we will discuss all of this in a little more detail as the interview progresses. But first of all, I'd like to congratulate Naren on a fantastic book, a fantastic addition to the layperson's lexicon. A collection of books about this esoteric field that is second nature to him, but to all of us, it's really quite new and fascinating. And it's very timely because it's come out at a time when everyone fancies themselves an amateur immunologist. These words have now entered popular dialogue, popular conversation. And so that's why it's so important, because then it clarifies some things for us. So thank you very much. And I invite you to open with your slide presentation, and then we can talk.
Yeah. So first of all, let me thank Roopa. Thank you first. And yeah, absolutely right. It was you are the sort of driver for me to write the book. And I've been reading your books for many years now, from Taranauts to the Gita to everything else. So I've always said, must write a book. It's something that it's been my passion to write this book for many years, almost a decade. After seeing you write so beautifully, right? And it's very hard to write simple. So I have to really congratulate you also, because I've learned so much from reading your books on how to simplify things. So thank you for that. And thank you for inviting me and introducing me to Penguin and Gurveen. And it's been such a fantastic journey for the last couple of years. So let me share my slides and show you a few slides just to put it in perspective of what the book contains. This won't take too long. So the title of the book we can talk about later, but is Good Genes Gone Bad. All credit to Gurveen, who sort of came up with this. The central thought of the vaccines and is discussion of history of vaccines and biologics through my eyes, the way I have seen it and experienced it. The book is really about failures, and it is my own experiences of failures, colossal failures, and it is my the explorations, which I call experiments of self-awareness, where from the failures you learn so much, and I felt it is there are very few books that I came across, or even manuscripts and papers that are written on failures. A lot of people write on successes, but I think it's really important to write about failures because we learn a lot. One of the things I have been exploring is this concept of inflection points. And when I've written the book, I've weaved a lot of soft skill things that I've considered for myself. Like, for example, what are inflection points that have the possibilities to change your career? And some of them are listed here, and they're all listed in the book. And these soft skills, like how to ask questions, how to make decisions, etc., I've weaved through the scientific part, because that's also a huge learning along the way to overcome these failures. And the cover of the book, there were lots of options, and it really was hard to choose the cover. But I want to thank also Kiran to write the foreword. She really was very generous, and she's written a beautiful foreword of her own failures in her life. And Siddharth also, who's a dear friend also now, has given a nice commentary, plus also has supported me in many different ways in helping write this book. So just one chapter, the story of gene therapy. One point I want to make. Gauri is my niece. She has made all the artwork, and you have to go to her Instagram feed to see how beautifully she doodles. So yeah, so take a look at her Insta to see her artwork. But she's done beautiful artwork for me in this book. So the way I write this story is through inflection points and sort of graphically show that there are successes and failures and ups and downs, and from what we learn from each one of them. So 7 stories, as Roopa said, and we'll go through some of them. This is Murli, my friend. I think he may be on the call. We'll see if we can bring him on. And he has factor VIII deficiency, and therefore he has haemophilia. And he is the person with the most positive attitude I know. He's just an amazing person. And he has also been an inspiration for me to write the book. And he's helped me enormously. This is just to exemplify sensationalism about gene therapy with a green fluorescent protein taken from some animal. You can put it into a mouse and make mice green. So, this is like the extreme of gene therapy. The story of gene therapy weaves through many, many years of successes and failures, which are here marked in red, which ultimately lead to very recent successes. And like Roopa said, all of these successes stand on shoulders of a lot of failures and things that people have done in the past. So this is an example of gene therapy where a gene is given into the lung of a cystic fibrosis patient, and the gene is expressed, as you can see at the bottom right. So a failure, a death in a trial, fantastic people who've done amazing work. Jim Wilson is a mentor. He's a professor in University of Pennsylvania, endured a lot of ups and downs, but it is their stories also which inspire, which I have written about, and his ability to discover new viruses in the face of tremendous failures, and then which led to ultimately things like treating eye diseases. And this is that same green fluorescent protein now being expressed in the eye of a non-human primate, which then ultimately looked at curing a dog from blindness, which ultimately led to success of gene therapy of the eye. And Jean Bennett, who's done a phenomenal amount of work, very good friend again, in curing blindness and getting approval of this drug made by Spark Therapeutics called Luxturna. And there are many, many gene therapy drugs that are currently approved now. Bringing it back to the hemophilia story, we don't have gene therapy hemophilia yet, but Kathy Hai and many of the scientists like this are working on this, and the therapy will be very close. Within years, we'll have gene therapy for hemophilia and help patients, especially like my friend Murli, who is now, I just met him a couple of months ago when I went to Chicago. Again, this just to put it in perspective, he is in the driver's seat here. I'm the passenger. So he is amazing, and that is also physically and figuratively. And so I'd love to get feedback from everyone who's read the book and is reading the book, and see how everything goes. So thank you very much. This is the book. Roopa, back to you.
Thank you. Okay. So, I love that you've used a lot of analogies in the book. It really helps to demystify difficult things. I might have wished for a few more diagrams, visuals, but apart from that, I just love the analogies that you've used. And I love how you bring in so many different things. You brought in the Upanishad somewhere. You brought in the battlefield somewhere. You brought in the way your sister's house runs somewhere. So, and school and college and university in the Biocon story. So there is a lot of very relatable stuff. I also have to congratulate you on that. That was very nicely done. Now, I want to bring in my own analogy here. So basically all your stories are what we might call the hero's journey. They follow that pattern. Okay, this is a thing that was introduced by Joseph Campbell. He's one of the best known mythologists in the world. And he talks about how, whether it's Harry Potter, Star Wars, Kung Fu Panda, or Cinderella, all mythology and fantasy kind of stories, which actually get to the bottom of the human soul, which appeal to, it's universal. It is a particular way that a story is told that makes it appealing. So And I wanted to ask you, in your journey of writing this book, because for you, I think I would consider this to be a hero's journey, because you hadn't written one before, you had been wanting to do it, and you finally did it with this book. So I want to ask you about each inflection point in the
Okay.
hero's journey. What was it? What were they for you? So the first one in any hero's journey, the first point is the call to adventure. So which was your call to adventure while writing this book?
Well, it wasn't so, I mean, the writing has not been the difficult part, the actual writing, because, over my career, my job is to write papers. So I've written literally more than 100 papers published in peer-reviewed journals. So writing for me is natural. I write all the time. So the act of, like, I think what most people struggle sometimes with writing is what to write and how to write it. That wasn't my problem. I think my problem was more about how do you write simple language? How do you, like you said, viral capsid? I was trying to think about what analogy can I use for viral capsid. At some point, I said I gave up. I said, okay.
Yeah.
At some point, some
people will figure it out.
Well, somebody will figure. Yeah, exactly. There's YouTube. There's always YouTube.
Yeah. Yes. And like you say in your book, the answers aren't the problem anymore. You have Google to get you all the answers. The trick is to ask the insightful questions, to ask the right questions to elicit the answer that you need. Yeah. So go on. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the difficult part is to how to write in simple language. And that course that I took, which is that book that Indira from Sunan, she teaches that course, right? So yeah, I love the title of the course, Bangalore's world famous semi-deluxe writing program. That was instrumental. That helped me a lot.
That was what brought you in. Yeah. So that was the call to adventure, perhaps, come on, let's do it. Now that so the next stage is the call to adventure, and then a reluctance to proceed. Was there a time when this call to adventure had been there for a long time to write this book, but you weren't proceeding until this mentor arrived? And I guess your mentor was this creative writing course.
Well, yeah, there were many inflection points for me to write this book. I've been always writing this book. So another thing that I'll tell you is I have been writing this book in a way for 10 years. So I write blogs, like let's say how to ask questions, how to make decisions, or this thing about Anjali's house, right? All of those stories are already written 10 years ago. I just had to copy them and put them in the context of the book. So it was almost assimilating things that I have written 10 years ago and write it now. So so in a way, there was an inflection point. This class that I took was an inflection point. Okay, now I'm going to sit down and write.
Yeah, so that's the commitment. Finally, you make that commitment to this book, not just another blog post or whatever, but to write a whole book. Okay. And then in the hero's journey, the next point is crossing the threshold from the known to the unknown.
Okay.
So when did that happen for you?
Okay. So actually, I want to make another point about the. I don't know if that was related to the question, but I'll tell you a point for the previous point again. So what happened is long time ago, and even currently, as I learn the flute, right? When I learned from my teacher Aditya Star, who's in Sangli, he and I talk about a lot of different things, right? Some days I'll call him on a Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning when I have my call, saying I'm tired. I had late night last night, and I don't feel like having the class today. Let's cancel, right? And it's but you know what? He told me some very interesting thing. He says, when you are uncomfortable, that's when you should play the flute, not when you're comfortable. So in fact, when I reflect on the best parts of the book that I felt like I wrote the best was when I was in a crazy situation, extremely, I'm sitting in a train with people, doing crazy things. That's where the best stuff comes. Not when sitting in front of a beach.
That's true. Not only that, not when you have plenty of time. Only when you have this little packet of time that you have to use well. For me, that works. When I know that the kids have gone to school and they're coming back in a few hours, this is all the time you have today. That's when the muse, that's my muse, that's when you start. Because you know that, but when you have the whole day, you're like, I'll do it a little later. So that's good. Yeah. And then, so this journey, the next part is belly of the whale, entering the belly of the whale, where you are completely like, at a loss. You have no idea what's going on. You have no previous experience of this. So how was that experience for you, the belly of the whale?
Yeah. So the unknown for me was not the science, not the
Not the science, obviously. Yeah.
Right. Unknown for me was a simplification and the storytelling part of it.
Yeah.
So that was the unknown. So in a way, it was not as daunting for me as it could have been, because if I didn't know the subject, that would have been more. Oh, I have to do so much research. It's amazing that you write the Gita. I mean, you have an engineering degree and you have like a completely different background and you're writing like that. But for me, I'm writing on a subject which I'm very comfortable with. So now to simplify that, I think that was my sort of belly of the whale, which is simplifying things.
Yeah. Okay. And then comes the next one is, the road of trials. All the challenges you faced while writing it, because it took you a while. Did COVID help or harm the process, the shutdown?
Yeah, COVID definitely helped. So I'll tell you, I think, again, from a simplification perspective, I wrote the entire content. So one of the challenges in writing the book is which 7 stories to choose, right?
Because right. That's a huge challenge. Yes, I can imagine.
Because there are a lot of things that I could have deleted. So I made some criteria. So I think the criteria I made is I'll choose those stories in which I was playing a role. That made it simpler.
And more personal also.
So that I should be able to tell the story a little bit more personally. I couldn't have to have third-person stories.
Right.
So that made it easier. The COVID surely made it easier. But I had already written the book prior to COVID, 2 years, a year earlier. So, but then when Gureen read the book or gave me feedback on the book, she actually told me that it's still quite difficult to read. And I simplified it enormously. And then last year, I simplified it further.
I see.
That's what last year took.
Okay. And what were these? Then there is a thing in the road of trials. This person, like Satyakama in the Chandogya Upanishad, you keep meeting animals or whatever that give you a little gift or an amulet that will help you along your way. Who are those people in the writing process? Or what were the amulets you received?
Well, every chapter has somebody or the other who I have spoken to. I've spoken to many people along the way. And a great example, the most is Murli. Murli, I have spoken to probably every day for the last year. I would say at 2:15, he has lunch at 2:15 in Chicago. And he picks up the phone and we pick up the phone and talk just for 15 minutes. And we talk about all kinds of things. And he talked not just about the chapter about him, but also about many other chapters. And he's very detail oriented. So he's very detailed. And then similarly, I talked to Jackie Miller, I talked to all of these different people that are different chapters in the book. So so all of these people helped me tell personal stories of what happened during that time.
Which made your story much more immediate for readers and for you also, I guess.
Yeah.
And then in Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, there's a point where the woman as temptress. There is always a woman as temptress, but basically it's anyone who can make you stray from your quest, or anyone or anything that made you feel like, oh my God, I can't do this and I have to drop it and maybe take a break. Or were there people or things situations that happened along the way that made you feel maybe I want to abandon it for a while, or did you not face any of those?
See, one of the things that you made it easier, you and Gurveen made it easy, is that Gurveen had already said, we'll publish the book. Before even writing the book, she had said, we'll publish your book, right? Who gets that opportunity?
That's true.
Right? That pressure of I'm going to write and then publish wasn't there.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
because
right.
I mean, obviously I told Gurveen what I'm going to write about, and Gurveen was pretty excited about the topic, even though she hadn't seen anything. She had not seen seen how I write, what I write. She had like no idea. Total trust, right? She just said because Roopa said so.
Yeah. But I think that's the thing, right? Everything works on trust in the world. We don't give it enough credit. but really even a transaction as everyday and pedestrian as getting into a taxi, the taxi driver trusts that you will pay him at the end of it. You trust the taxi driver that he will not kill you every time. So there is, I think we ignore or don't give enough credence or credit to the bonds of trust that hold us together as people. So trust is definitely part of it. And then
no, I think trust, you bring out a very important point. So if you think about, I love the comment about women as a temptress, but so I think I trust a lot of people, and I trust a lot of systems, and I trust a lot of that people always will do the right thing every single time. It's a Ram Rajya type of thing, right?
Yes. But that's not everybody. That's a very innate quality in some people. And they go forth into the world, free of mind, free of fear. And then the universe basically mirrors back whatever you are putting out is what I believe. So if you put out trust and fearlessness, that's what will come back to you, and love, and it's your whole book, the kind of friends you've made, the people you've talked about, it all shows, I think it tells more about you than about vaccines, or equally about you than about than your work. I mean, as much about you as your work, because in every example you bring in friends, family, and it's very personal, because even in the last chapter, the COVID chapter, where you say, I almost shrieked in delight because this was my friend and she was making the announcement for Pfizer on the vaccine and asking for approval. I mean, that is like crazy. I'm just so in awe that both the person who announced the vaccine for Pfizer and the one who led the team for Moderna are people you know well and have worked
very
with.
Good friends, very good friends.
So this is like, you really had a ringside seat, and through you we get a ringside seat, because actually if we haven't lost anybody, ourselves been ill, or in somehow are part of the 95% of the human population whose immune systems are able to take care of the COVID-2 virus, then we've had a ringside seat at some of the most amazing work done by humans in a very short while. So, I think like everything has a good side and a not so good side. Just being here as part of the population that is witness to this. So and then the return. So the last part of the Campbell's hero's journey is the return. When you return with the prize to tell everybody about it. And that also seemed for me to fit your quest, your whole journey so well. You wrote the book, and you have returned with this offering to all of us, so that we understand it a little better. We understand the processes a little better.
You just asked 6 questions. You have to ask one more.
One more question. Oh, okay, wait. There must have been something I left out in that. There is one. So one thing, just before you actually share with the world, there is a inflection point called a reluctance to share. When you're quite happy in the writing process itself, you feel a reluctance to finish it, sign off, press send, and say, now it's out of my control. I cannot do anything about it. If there are mistakes, I cannot correct them. And, there is no way to improve it anymore. Did you face that, a reluctance to return?
Okay, short answer, no. Because I've done it 100 times before. The manuscripts you publish, boom, gone, and it's gone into cyberspace, and you can't get it back.
And it's going to be there forever in cyberspace. No way to retract it.
Right. But one of the things that I also liked is the fact, the reluctance to share. I'll tell you one thing. It is not directly related to your question. One of the questions that somebody had asked me earlier also while I was doing this is, did you share the book with anybody while you're writing? To give you comments and this and that and the other. And I wonder what you do, but I'll tell you what I did. Is when I wrote papers, scientific papers, usually it's with many authors, like 5 to 10 authors, all of us contributing here and there. Somebody has to collate all of that. There's tremendous amount of discussion that goes on. Every sentence is edited, right? So that's the process that I'm familiar with and I'm used to. So that comfort zone would have easily been, why don't I give this chapter to Jackie? Please read it and then send me your comments, and then whatever comments you have, I'll edit those, and then I'll complete it. But I consciously made the decision that I'll not share it with anyone. In fact, I did not even share it with my sisters, my family, nobody.
I don't either.
I just want to put it out. This is my thought, and let's see what happens. Because I don't want to be biased by somebody else's thinking.
Yeah. Oh, then it's never ending. The process. You'll keep on making corrections, and then you will be you won't come out through the book because you're. Yeah.
The only chapter which I'm glad I did, which I did with the collaboration, is Murli. Murli did a lot of discussion with me, because I thought that first chapter needed to have a lot of specific details.
Right. So we're done with your 7 questions about the journey of writing the book. So now let's dive into the book itself. And I want to go backwards, though. I want to start with chapter 8 about COVID-19. And like Winston Churchill said about the British Air Force at the end of the Second World War, never in the field of human conflict has so much been owed by so many to so few. I feel here it's not conflict, but never in the field of human crisis, let's say, has so much been owed by so many to so few. And I talk about the immunologists who did some ridiculous work in bringing us a vaccine, trials, everything completed, toxicology, everything done, pharmacology, within what, less than a year? How? So can you tell us a little bit about that process? And you say that you went to return to the US in March 2020. Within a week, everything went into shutdown, into lockdown, and you were sitting and watching television and thinking of what all, because you were also on an advisory committee to India to suggest modes of treatment or already existing drugs that could work, because that's always the first response. What do we already have that we can use while we? So tell us a little bit about, because it's so current.
Yeah, so I think I keep saying this. You already used the statement earlier, like, what we've learned is what we are doing now is based on experiences that a lot of people have had in the past. So the another comment that I make, where that Bruce Levine, who also is a good friend, has made a comment in that chapter that I've written, is he always starts his lectures like this by saying, the overnight success of this cancer therapy took 30 years. That's exactly what's happened for the vaccines also. I mean, like, for example, the mRNA vaccines have the people who have been working on the mRNA vaccine, Drew Weissman and Kariko, have been working on this for the last 30 years, right? A little tweak here, a little tweak there, keep moving on. But it is Pfizer, it's Catherine Jensen and her team who took the risk of saying, okay, we are going to do this because it has all of the features that will meet the criteria for getting a fast vaccine. So they knew all the steps. It's not like they didn't know anything. All the steps they knew, and they really took information from history. What have we learned in the past? And they created a team which allowed things to happen. Now, the collaboration also was a phenomenal collaboration, right? The genome of the virus was sequenced in January, right? And within days, the whole world knew what the sequence was.
I know.
It takes 10 years to do one sequence, if in the past. But now with technology, everything happened overnight. These gene sequences can be done overnight. And so technology advances has helped. The ability to analyze data. Look at where AI, ML and everything is today, even from like 2 years ago, 5 years ago. Like we are in a technologically extremely advanced situation right now, right? Regulatory agencies, they bent over backwards to help people to make the drug rather than, be adversaries, not adversaries, but they are the gatekeepers.
Gatekeepers, yeah.
But they gave approval on emergency, not full.
It has never been done before, you say in your book. It has never been done before.
Never been done before. So all countries are playing the role. Even in our country, even in India, the DCGI's office, he's done his and Mr. Somani and his team have done so much work at the background. We don't see all of that, right? We just see what's at the end, but there's a lot of teamwork that played, a lot of historical perspective that people learned from, a lot of advanced technologies. It's like everything came together, and there was no choice, right? There's no choice.
Yeah.
Like you said, like when you write the book, you have this much time.
Yeah. Although it's interesting that you say that because they knew the mRNA, how it works, so they could introduce that kind of vaccine, etc. It didn't always work, according to your book itself, not with COVID. But if you go back to HIV, the prevailing feeling at that time was, I'll just paraphrase what you've written. So what Naren says in the book, in his chapter on HIV is something that he has worked on very, very closely on the vaccine himself at Merck. And so HIV, obviously, I mean, I think this is quite well understood or unknown, that because it was a celebrity disease, it happened to famous people, it happened to rich people, it happened to white people who were also men. So, you know, it got a lot of attention. And I think immunology, so these are the kinds of strange inflection points, unpredictable, which advance things, like wars advance weaponry and technology so much, and code breaking, all that happens because of a war. And because of AIDS, so much immunology was advanced because a cure had to be found very quickly. And you say that, you know, in 1984 itself, a team from the National Institutes of Health, I think, made an actual announcement that, okay, we've cracked the biology of this virus, HIV. Now, how long can it take for us to make a vaccine? We know exactly what to do. We just need to stop that GP. We need to make GP 120 into the thing and give it as a vaccine, and everything will be done. And they made an announcement, and the President Ronald Reagan actually made an announcement, in 2 years, you'll have a vaccine. Now it's almost 40 years later, and we still don't have a vaccine for HIV. So tell us a little bit about that, since you were so closely in. What are the different stages? It's the most fascinating chapter, all the mistakes that were made, and how much money, my God, in the trials and the development.
So HIV is, you know, so when I looked at the COVID in March of 2019 from my eyes, right, I could see HIV written all over COVID, because I thought, you know, there will be something unexpected like HIV that would happen with COVID, that we would develop a vaccine against spike, right? And just like GP120, I know we're getting technical, but just like GP120 for HIV is not sufficient to protect against HIV. I thought maybe spike alone would not be sufficient to protect against COVID. You might need another protein which we haven't discovered yet.
Which is hiding behind this one, maybe.
So, but it turned out like we lucked out a little bit.
Lucked out, really. And I wanted 1 minute. Sorry, I was trying to.
So while you're saying that, you know, in our career advances, if you notice in one of those inflection points, one of the things that you can do for yourself is luck. Luck transforms careers.
The other lucky thing, I think, about COVID that you say about the, not COVID, but the virus, the COVID-2 virus, is that it didn't attack the immune system. I mean, it's a ferocious virus. It starts with the lungs, but those receptors are there even on the cells of the colon, on the heart, on the kidneys. So it can attack everywhere, actually. And you say, quite surprising for me, that was very surprising, that in fact, the immune response that the body mounts to it is equally ferocious. And that's what actually causes the cytokine storm that kills people. I mean, it's just the whole body becomes a battlefield. So it was lucky for us that it wasn't attacking because HIV, the problem is attacks the immune system itself. So then what do you do, right? I just want to remind the audience, we have about, I'll be talking to Naren for about 10-15 more minutes, but if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and we'll take them right after that. Okay, I'll go on to the next question. I'm just trying to see what else. The other thing you say is that, you know, everybody's been talking Spanish flu. 1918, some 5 million people dead. No, 50 million people dead. And that was a flu. And we still don't have a flu. We don't have a vaccine for the flu yet, for the influenza virus even. And because it mutates so much. And what was the most astonishing thing for me was that the WHO actually predicts the strain of influenza that's going to happen this year. And then the vaccine companies go and make a vaccine for that strain that year. Is that going to happen with the COVID as well? Because it's also mutating like crazy. I mean, I know what do you feel as somebody who's been in this field for so long? Do we even know enough about it? Sure, we have a vaccine, but we have no idea of long-term how it progresses and how it mutates.
Yeah,
What
we
is
have
your
some idea.
okay?
Coronaviruses are not
Not that new.
new
The
viruses. They are
class, yeah.
the class of viruses. So they mutate, but the rate at which they mutate is not as much as, let's say, HIV or something like that. But
Okay.
you know, it is like all of these viruses. They are surviving also, right? They are also, as much as we are trying to survive, the virus is also trying to survive. So,
Yes.
so that's why it mutates, because it's
Yeah.
trying to survive. And so
And
when
are the mutations more virulent usually, or
yeah,
less, or
no, so what happens is it's survival of the fittest. Mutations are random,
okay?
and only the good ones
Oh,
survive.
okay. So they are obviously the strong ones then. If they survive, they're going to be able to
Right,
harm you a lot more.
right.
Yeah, yeah. So is the what we are trying to do for AIDS, which is to stop the binding and fusing of the virus to the host cell, is
Yeah,
that where the next inflection point lies? If we can, then we can create across all strains, all mutants. If you stop the binding and fusing itself, then it doesn't matter what the genetic material inside is.
yeah. So it's probably not as simple as that. I mean, the immune system is extremely complex. The one it has the immune system, like the Indian Army or the army system. Like there are many aspects of war, right? So there's you have the Air Force, you have the Navy, you have the army.
Infantry, yeah.
But like by saying that we'll block the receptor binding, it's saying, oh, army is good enough for a country.
Yeah. Or we are saying we'll close the borders or
We'll
something.
close the borders, yeah. Yeah, we'll close the borders, right?
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
we'll be fine. That's what
Yeah,
happens.
obviously then the guerrilla warfare will happen and snipers
And then,
will
yeah,
come.
people will come from sea, land, and
Yeah, yeah. No, I finally understood very well the T cells and B cells because of the infantry and Air Force analogy.
yeah, good, good.
It was very visual for me. I could imagine the B cells, CD4 is saying, go on now, do this. And those, the fact, I mean, I didn't know that they present the antigen on top of themselves. So that is the identification thing, that's the signal. So
Yeah,
those
yeah.
are very complex things, but I think you have explained them very nicely. I actually understood what you were saying. Then I wanted to ask one thing you had said was you talk about somebody in 1846. What vaccine was that? The
That
plague?
was,
No,
yeah, that
no.
was chicken pox, I believe. Yeah. Yeah.
Measles.
Measles.
Yes.
Measles.
You talk about that, Peter somebody as the
Peter Panem, yeah.
Peter Panem as the first vaccination,
Well,
but
it was the
Edward
first.
Jenner, Pasteur,
Edward Jenner, no, Edward Jenner actually gave the smallpox to somebody, right? But this
yeah,
was a large-scale epidemiological study, which
I see. So more
demonstrated,
formal, yeah.
yeah, which demonstrated that people who get infected with measles and survive, when the second time around, when the measles epidemic came, those are the ones that don't get infected. See, at that time, microbiology was not, nobody knew virus was there, nothing was known, right?
Yeah.
They were just observing things.
Observing. Yeah, but even Jenner, that's how he figured out. I mean, variolation was happening anyway. He himself had been variolated as a child.
Yeah, yeah.
But what he observed was that cow hands, the milkmaids who got cowpox did not get smallpox.
Smallpox.
And that's how he created a vaccine. So, because if he had given smallpox, even an attenuated virus, sometimes they would still fall ill and die.
Yeah.
But when he gave cowpox, it's completely harmless, but it also prevented smallpox. So
Exactly.
I was thinking maybe he's the first guy for a vaccine kind of stuff.
I mean, we can argue,
Now we can talk and discuss that, but yeah.
But I mean, obviously, when Edward Jenner is obviously the father of vaccines.
I mean, that's why it's called vaccine, right? Because vaka is cow. Yeah.
Yes, vaka's cow, correct.
Yeah.
No, the reason I gave the measles story, because I wanted to give a story other than Jenner, because Jenner,
yes,
textbooks all the time,
very
right?
well known.
It's like something else.
Yeah, true. Yes.
Yeah.
And so let's come to hemophilia, your first chapter, since we are going to wind up and Murli is here. And there is an AIDS connection there also. And that's the scariest thing I ever read, that, blood transfusion used to be the only way to cure or to treat a hemophiliac. And then because of AIDS, the blood banks in the US got contaminated with HIV blood. And hemophiliacs were given HIV blood for transfusions, and they all became AIDS patients. My God, that's such a scary, and Murli just missed it. So maybe we can invite him on now if he's willing to come on and tell us his story a little bit.
Hi, Murli. If you're there, we'll spot you.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, they're going to put your video on. If you can put your video on.
All right. Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, we can.
Hold on one second.
So Murli, you want to, Roopa, is there a specific question, or do you want to ask? We can just tell him.
No, just
you know what?
tell
The
us.
video is not coming on. I'm going to see what I can do.
Okay, we can just.
I am trying to get the video on, but unfortunately, and I am getting the alert from the host saying start your video.
Okay.
But I'm unable to start my video. I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But you know what? Can we continue, because I know we are somewhat limited on time.
So that's fine. We can still have your voice on. And
okay.
We'd still like to hear from you. And maybe Naren, you and Murli can talk about.
So Murli, I think lots of people are going to read about the aspects of your book, but this question that Roopa asked, right? Can you talk a little bit about hemophiliacs getting HIV infection in the 1980s and 90s?
Yes. So in the early 80s, HIV was spreading in the United States. And at that time I was in India. So that's how I stayed safe. I came to the United States only in 89. And the blood supply had started to get cleaned up. So that's the big story. But getting into the details of that, the HIV had gotten into the blood pool, because then initially it was all pooled blood, something called cryoprecipitate that had already been discovered. And it was made from pooled plasma. And yes, and anybody could be a donor. And there are so many horror stories of prisoners being used as donors. And initially it started out as a gay virus in the United States, and of course it spread everywhere. And because cryoprecipitate was the main mode of treatment for patients with hemophilia, so a lot of patients were infected at that time, and they had side effects. Lymphosarcoma was the primary one, and therefore, and they were sidelined. They were harassed. There's a very important, significant act in the United States called Ryan-White Act, and it basically prevents people from discriminating against HIV. But yes, that is what, and there are still some living, but over 10,000 hemophiliacs have died. There are still some living.
Oh my God, 10,000. Okay. Just from this contaminated blood transfusion.
Contaminated blood. Yeah, there is a movie called Bad Blood on how this happened. It's almost a docudrama, because there were a lot of interviews in that movie. It's everywhere.
And where are we at now with hemophilia? A cure or?
There is no cure for hemophilia. What there is
gene therapy thing was going to.
Yes, it is. It is in late-stage clinical trials for factor 8. There are multiple clotting factors that could cause hemophilia. 8 and 9 are the top two. And for factor 8, there is gene therapy in clinical trials. So is for factor 9. So it's almost like a race. In the next 2 to 3 years, we should start getting them into the FDA for approval. So yes, I have friends who are in clinical trials. In 5 years, I expect that it should be available in the market.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful to know, Murli. I wish you all the best. I hope that
Thank you.
happens, sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
yeah, I just like to end with the Biocon story. That is fantastic because Naren, for those who don't know who are listening in, was the head of R&D at Biocon between 2015 and 2019, and he took a biosimilar for approval to the FDA, which actually biosimilar is a drug that is developed in-house or independently, but it mimics a drug that has been developed earlier and the patent has run out, perhaps, or close to running out. So you are then allowed to develop your own cheaper and make it a generic kind of drug, right? And you talk of the kind of processes and rigor involved in just taking forget about developing the drug. That is one part of it. And then taking it for approval. And you said 5,000 questions you were prepared, 5,000 different questions how to answer. And then finally Biocon was the first ever Indian company to get FDA approval. And it's for breast cancer, right? That drug. Yeah. So, I mean, I just want to say a massive congratulations to you for leading that effort. And just tell us a little bit about that journey.
Well, first of all, I have to, it is not, I was there, but the work was done by a huge team. No one person can ever.
You have mentioned them also. Yeah.
Right. And so it's definitely a team effort. But I think one of the things is, it is a biologic drug, and I've explained what biologic drugs are in the book. These drugs are the future of how medicine is going to be treated, how we're going to treat patients with these biologic drugs, not chemical entities. Now, in Biocon, there were many factors that allowed Biocon to develop these drugs, just like we developed the COVID vaccines right now because of all the learnings that we've had in the past. Biocon also systematically over the last 4 decades has been accumulating knowledge, talent. They had finances, they had the money. They've collaborated with Mylan.
And physical space, you mentioned that.
And the physical space and everything. So everything came together. And I happened to be in that last phase where, I could, utilize everything that Biocon had learned in the last 40 years and then, deliver the last end. Not that the last mile is difficult. The last mile is actually the most difficult.
Yeah, that's what. So
right?
That's where you had experience because you had taken other drugs to approval, right? With other companies.
That is what I did a lot in Biocon. And one of the things I focused on, and this is why I write the soft skill part in the book, is the science or the technology and the work that you have to do, you must know, right? You must know that.
Yeah.
But what is the difference between the scientific aspects in your career is the soft skills. Nobody in science, in all of these universities here and in India, nobody teaches how to do public speaking, how to do as core business. That is so important.
Yeah.
That should be core subjects in an engineering program.
Okay. And what about now that you bring up soft skills and what about ethics? Is ethics taught as part of the ethics of vaccine development? Because now at least in design and artificial intelligence, intelligent design, they are teaching that it's a very big part of ethics. Shouldn't it be part of every bio course as well, especially people who are...
It is not necessarily, I can't speak for every course, but in general, I would say it's not included. It would not be included, right? But it should be. Like, these are the kind of subjects where I think transformative work can be done. And one thing I think with the new education policy that has come out in India, if we really take to heart, and universities and institutions take that to heart and try to develop programs which are fit for purpose for the particular students that need to study, then you can make a curriculum which is much more feasible,
robust and like holistic,
and meaningful to applications to the real world, right? Rather than abstract.
Yeah. Because like you've talked about so many. Then you talked about so many times about how many people dying is okay. Like you talk about that case with Wyatt and the rotavirus.
Yeah.
Yeah, where the court said it's okay, if 28 children died of interception, but I mean babies, because otherwise, I mean, how many people have been saved? And you raised that very important question. Sure, it was taken out of circulation in the US, which was fine because the kids in the US have access to rehydration therapies and all that, and they can be saved. But what about all those children in Africa who could have been saved by this vaccine?
Yeah.
But because they said, like, if it doesn't work for American kids, it shouldn't be given to African kids.
Right.
I mean, if you're going to take it. So that's a very difficult thin line tightrope to walk. What do you think this is the last question, for someone who's been watching all this from the ringside and have seen so many of these things, is the greater good more important? Or, I mean, I know it's a very question with no answers, but what do you think? Where should the balance lie?
I think first of all, meaningful conversations should be had with the people who are involved. So I think ethics is never black and white, right? What is ethical today?
Yes.
What is not ethical today was ethical a couple of years ago,
yes.
Right?
And what is ethical to one set of people or culture may not be to another as well.
So ethics is sort of a fluid subject. So conversations need to be had to determine whether particular vaccines should be approved or not approved in a particular country, and you can't blame that they did this, therefore we do this. You can't say that, right? Because the context is very different. So that's my point. I think in all of these, since we're using the word ethics, it could be ethic, it could be culture, it could be whatever, the finances, the resources, everything that is involved in developing drugs is different for a different country. Right. So in India, for example, generics and biosimilars and things like that are very, very important.
Yeah,
because that is what is going to reduce the cost of goods. It's going to reduce pricing. Right.
Not just for us, but other countries like us. I mean, Africa, we will export to them. So yeah.
Yeah. And so like, for example, we don't have a great insurance system like the US does. Like here, if like Murli's example, and he was telling me about it, like his drug cost him $84,000 for him to pay. If he had to pay out of his pocket, he would not have been able to pay, right? But the system allows him to get that treatment. We don't have such systems there. So we have to find alternatives to these things. And sometimes, you might cross ethical boundaries because of these situations.
Yeah. And I think COVID vaccine, the search and development of the COVID has brought all these issues to the fore again, right?
Yeah.
How do you distribute the vaccine? Do countries hoard the vaccine 3 times in their population because this may not work, that will work, or should you give it to people who have never had a single dose? Yeah. So very, very, as always, lovely talking to you, Naren. And this is full of possibilities, right on the edge of everything, and full of dilemmas as well. And but what an exciting time, and what an exciting field to be in. And for me, even that, for me, before I started reading your book, vaccines were always attenuated live virus in my mind. That's where it started. But when I started reading it, and it talked about designer viruses, which you create by reassortment, you bring in a monkey something and a human something, and you introduce viruses into the human body so that they can protect you. I'm like, wow, this is like crazy. Do you feel sometimes as a scientist that these little microscopic non-living, or on the border of living and non-living things, are actually intelligent life who are out to get you? Like, do you get that feeling sometimes?
No, they're just trying to, they're like us, they're just trying to survive.
Survive, yeah.
And I always say that they are 300, if you just go by age as a factor, they are 300 million years old. We are only 2 million.
Right. Yeah, we shouldn't be having so many successes against them. So good for us that we are. Thank you so much. Let me look at sorry.
No, you can look at the question, but while you're looking at that, I'll tell you one thing about a funny story about what I thought about you, about the analogy. There was one analogy that I've written about Mandukya Upanishad.
That was the one I didn't get actually very well.
That is where the analogy is more difficult than the actual.
I know. I was like, what? Wait, I'm not getting. And in fact, in your first opening intro, you talk about, the process of learning, of understanding something, goes from data to information to knowledge to wisdom. That reminded me of something from the Upanishads. Did it?
Okay.
Kathopanishad, the chariot metaphor. It is absolute. So the data is collected by the horses, the senses,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And then the lower mind, the manas, which is the reins, they
yes.
transmit it to the higher mind, the charioteer who's sitting there. And so the information is the reins, which is like
Right,
transmitted. But knowledge is done by the charioteer, because he has to understand that he shouldn't get overwhelmed by all this and let the horses go in any direction. He
right.
has to practice restraint, hold the reins, and then let go of the things that are not important, put on his blinkers, only see the road ahead.
And that is,
And wisdom, I thought, comes from the rider in the chariot, who understands that while all this is required to keep the chariot running, you are not the chariot. You are separate.
wonderful. Yes. So good, so good, so good.
Okay, let me ask the question. So we have two questions. Kalpana Patankar asks, how do you inform, there's also a very good question which I wanted to, how do you inform and convince anti-vax people that this vaccine is not going to hurt them or alter your genes? Now the roadblocks are not only global availability, but skeptics. In fact, that's the biggest roadblock in America. Here in India, we don't have so many skeptics, but skeptics who won't receive the vaccine. And you know, when I was reading your book, I felt that sometimes they have a reason to be so anti-vax, because some of the stories you tell about the spectacular failures where people were actually deeply affected, but then you can be a little scared about, you know, do these guys know what they're doing, particularly in COVID, because it was developed so quickly.
Right, right. So, you know, there's a personal story in this, and also a lot of people. So I'll tell you one story that I asked Paul Offit, who's a professor here at UPenn, and I've talked a lot about him about this book. One of the stories he told us, and he tells about you know, maybe why anti-vaxxers do what they do, and I'm just categorizing them in a category just to answer the question. He tells a story about a patient who came, a little kid who came into his office to get vaccinated with some vaccine, right? And the mother was holding the child, and Paul was giving the vaccine, and just he had filled the syringe, he was ready to give the vaccine, and just before giving the vaccine, right, that child got a seizure, right? Just because, you know, some random, we don't know what, he didn't know what the seizure was. If that vaccine was given just before the seizure, you couldn't have convinced the mother that it's not related, right? So maybe there are a group of anti-vaxxers who are legit believers that vaccine can cause harm because they have their own personal experiences. And that we cannot undermine, because no vaccine is 100% safe. You will get some side effects. You might die of a vaccine. It's not absolutely, you know, it's not zero. There is some side effect, right? So some of these anti-vaxxers are people who have really experienced personal experiences, either their own or family or someone who's been affected by given the vaccine. So them we have to convince, maybe by showing additional data or whatever. I think those are the more rational group of people who I think will if they engage in the conversation, then we can make a certain case, right? The other extreme is like politically motivated. Those I think we can never change, because they have beliefs which are not based on data, and it's very hard to have conversations, and they're not willing to sit on the table and have the obvious conversations, right? And so those are the two extremes, and then in between. And then beyond that, beyond the I guess beyond the ones who are the I'm going to call them politically motivated ones versus the genuine anti-vaxxers, I guess one aspect that we have to also acknowledge as people who develop vaccines, we don't know everything about everything. The human system, the body is extremely complicated. We are just
also extremely individualistic also, no? Every
individualistic. So we don't know so much. We know less than what we know. Than what we know. So there is a lot of unknown. So I don't think we are also I use we as a class of group who are the scientists who are developing the vaccines, but we don't know everything. But at this point, it's always a risk-benefit ratio. Is the benefit greater than the risk?
And the second question that we have from Anjali Roy is, if a person is already suffering from an autoimmune disease and is on immunosuppressants, how safe is it or how advisable is it to take the COVID vaccine?
Yeah, I think, again, you'll have to go to your specific physician to know the nature of the autoimmune disease or the nature of the immune suppression that you have, and whether to take the vaccine or not. And, you know, that's why you make different kinds of vaccines. Live attenuated vaccines, which have the potential of replicating, are not generally given to patients who have immune deficiencies. But there are other, like the Novavax vaccine or the protein vaccine, maybe the mRNA vaccines, proteins that these vaccines that don't replicate will give the a better immune response. And that's why the third shot, which is now approved in the US for patients who have immune deficiencies, is approved. So if you have immune deficiencies of some kind, then you can get a third shot.
Only for immune deficiency people.
It is approved only for patients with people with 65 and above, and patients who have some kind of an underlying immune deficiency.
Okay. Thank you, Naren. That was wonderful. I mean, if anybody wants to ask some more questions, here's your chance. Please type it in now, or if you want to, you know, if you've read the book and want to give some feedback. Thank you, Murli.
Yeah. All right. Great.
So anyway, to everyone who hasn't read this book yet, please do. It's a fantastic book. You might have to focus and sit. And you know what, I read it, the first 3 chapters, I read them again this morning, and so much more I understood. More for as far as retention is concerned. The first time when I read, there was so much new information, and I kept going from chapter to chapter, and the previous information kept evaporating. But now when I read it again, then it sit better. So, and now that I know how the whole trajectory, where it ends, so now I'm like, the pieces are falling, the pennies are dropping earlier. So I would recommend that you read it twice or more. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you, Roopa. Roopa, thank you so much, and thank you everyone on the call in the background, Dipti, Chetna, all of Sumangala, who have helped in putting this thing together.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.